And the thing about property investing is that we shouldn't hold on to the long-term gain.
Now, other people's money. This is a very scary thing to actually do, right? The reason why I'm saying scary.
The last topic that I want us to cover on is ownership, because you did mention ownership, right? This is something that, especially as property investors, we do not take to heart until we find ourselves in trouble when it comes to ownership. First things first, we need to establish liability versus income, right? And then we also need to understand what term are we playing. Are we playing a long-term game or are we playing a mid-term game? Because we need to establish a specific year. So if we are saying a long-term game, we are saying by the end of the 4th year, I would have received all my money back. And then from the 5th year, I'll be making a profit because I would have been making cash flow from year 1 to year 5. So after that, that's when I'll be making profit. I mean, we've been fortunate enough to be in both industries, both property investing and also being in the car industry. So with the car industry, just to let you guys know, I was an Uber driver.
This guy was a taxi driver. He was a taxi driver.
I was an Uber driver. So what happened is that we got to really understand how the game is when it comes to that. Because now looking at a car is a depreciating, if you're going to say a depreciating asset or liability, ultimately it's up to you how you're going to define it. However, what we noticed in our journey is that at the end of year 5, the car was in a terrible state. And when it came to selling now, it was a big problem because, trust me, when these guys negotiate, they negotiate you strong.
They don't play, hey?
They don't play.
It's like you in the property industry. You don't play around.
But then now, if you're going to compare that with property investing, is that if you really maintain your property and you bought it in an area whereby the prices are really stable, I don't want to even say times 2 or times 3. If you bought it in a good area, you're able to then even sell it at least at that price that you got it at, man. So we really need to understand whether we're going into the car industry or property investing. We really need to understand the game, especially when it comes to the exit plan. Exit is if I do sell. I think this is where people miss it. People are not thinking that if I'm to be selling, will I be making a profit or not?
No, like I want to really emphasize something that you really spoke about there, right? When you did the comparison between the car and also the property, right? So we were also fortunate enough to be in a situation whereby we saw the difference between the two. So what had happened is that someone had actually purchased a taxi, and then at the same time they bought the property. So now looking at the two, yes, at the time when the taxi was still operating, it was actually generating more cash flow. However, they bought the taxi at 450,000. They also bought the property at 450,000. And now the property, the car is actually selling for 180,000. And when you're looking at the property is still selling at 450,000 at worst case scenario, right? So now that's something that I really want to emphasize in terms of the different assets, that if you are actually going to be buying a car, you need to understand what Neo had actually said, that are you in, what kind of business are you in? Are you in a business that will actually generate a lot of money right now so that you can take all of that money and invest it in something that will give you in the long term? Or are you investing in something that is in the long term right now?
Yeah, I mean, it was quite strategic how we went about it when we were in Uber, right, and Taxify, because our strategy was more of how can we gain as much cash flow right now from the trips that we're making, so ultimately we can build our credit score. Because we knew that when you want to be your own boss, I know that a lot of times somebody will say that I want to be my own boss. However, they're not talking about the practicalities of that. Because I'm not of a sense whereby I'm going to be telling somebody that you quit your job today. Because let's be honest, as property investors, if you are going to be applying for a home loan, they are going to want your credit score. They are going to want your paycheck. So now looking at it, if you don't have that, how do you position yourself in that market? Unfortunately, you need to do the groundwork, man. I'm going to be honest with you, because now if you don't do the groundwork in terms of having a pay slip and also having that bank slip that will actually give the bank that motivation that, you know what, this person, we can lend them X amount, it's going to be really hard, because that's when you start depending on other people. Other people's money, you've been there. Let's talk about other people's money. And what's your experience with other people's money?
The hardest part about other people's money is that you need to be transparent, number one, to them, that what's going on with the money. Number two, what you also need to be aware of is that if you do lose that money, how are you going to actually regain that money, right?
Yeah.
So now I remember when we were asking for funding from other people, we were thinking that, okay, asking for funding is the first part. The second part is that now that I have this funding, I can't mess up. I'd rather go home and make a loss.
You'd rather
than
eat
give
pop. You'd rather eat pop, man.
pop and milk. Just give me pop and milk. I know that if I have already given my investors, the next time when they do actually invest with me, I know that they won't actually be having second thoughts. But now the problem is that with most people, what they do is that when they do make a loss, they'd rather protect themselves.
Yeah.
Now, when you protect yourself, the question is that the next time when you're going to be asking for someone to actually join you in a deal, will they actually give you the money? So for me, whenever I'm actually going to go into a deal, I need to make sure that for my investors, that was a guaranteed. That if I'm going to be asking Neo 10,000 right now, I need to give Neo the 10,000 plus the interest that I had actually promised him. Then what happens after that will be on my head. Now, other people's money. This is a very scary thing to actually do, right? The reason why I'm saying scary, in theory, right, you don't have any money, you're going to someone to ask for money and then they give you the money, then you're happy, you invest and then you get the cash flow back. Now, in practical, what often happens is that you need to be aware of the people that you're asking money from. Now, this is, a lot of people don't really speak about this. Now, if I'm going to be asking money from someone who's really a control freak and wants to always be there with every progress,
You say control freak, man.
it's going to be hectic for you as the investor. The reason why I'm saying this is because they will actually be saying that, no, my favorite color is pink and I actually invested in this property. So you need to paint this property pink. And when it doesn't sell with the pink color, they'll come back to you and be like, your thing isn't actually working. So what's wrong now? So now every time you're actually going to be going with an investor, something that you really need to make clear from the get-go is that they do not have any say with regards to how you are actually going to be fixing the property. Because you are the expert in property investing or in the property industry, they shouldn't actually come through and be telling you that, no, I think that we should paint this color instead of this color. I think we should actually use this estate agent. Their main reason for investing with you is to just give you the money and then you are going to give them their money back with the interest. That's something that you really need to make clear from the get-go.
And with other people's money from my side, I've lost out on a deal from other people's money. Somebody snatched out a property because of other people's money. We really need to understand when I'm saying other people's money and I'm going to be dependent on other people to grow my asset portfolio, what is the practicality of that? Because here's the worst case scenario, right? Especially people don't talk about this. I can use other people's money, be in a deal whereby I didn't take out the cent from myself. However, now, if I'm not making money from that deal, what's the use? Because imagine, look at it this way. Let's say that I borrowed $1 million from Lebo. I managed to secure this deal, only to find out that the difference between the income and expenses, what I promised him and also the bank, and then I'm left with about 200 Rand. And then I really need to ask myself, is it worth it? Because now, if I'll be defaulting, the contract that I signed with Lebo was that I'll be paying you every month X amount. So if the tenant does decide to leave, now with other people's money, who should be liable to pay for rent for that month? You find out that I've been saving 200 Rand every month, only to find out that I promised him 7,000. So when am I going to get to that 7,000 that I can know that this is the buffer? Because now when you're looking at it from return on investment again, if you're solely focusing on other people's money, your return on investment is infinite because I didn't use my money. However, if something is to happen bad to that deal, whose money will I be using again?
I like the fact. And now the thing is, a lot of people don't really calculate that how much are they actually going to be giving the investor. And now it becomes hard for you to calculate how much you're going to be giving to the investor if you yourself don't know how much you're actually going to be getting. Now, this is the example that I want to give you, right? Say, for instance, right now, you have a property and now you are seeing this property, you're able to actually flip the property. You ask for 1,000, for 1 million from other people's money, right? And then supposedly it happens that this person actually gives you the 1 million and you saying that you're going to be giving them 10%, right? Because you heard somewhere on YouTube or maybe somewhere on TikTok, somebody was like, guys, if you're going to be asking for other people's money, just make sure that you give them 10%. Fair enough. So now that you have actually done that, when the money comes back, you're able to give them their 1 million back and you're able to give them 10,000 or the 10%, right? So now the question would be that how much do you have left? Now, if you only have left,
I see where you're going.
If you only have 10,000 Rand left,
Aish.
now the question would be that if I'm going to say 10,000 divided by 6 months that you were actually working, best case scenario, 6 months, was, even though the return on investment, right, the ROI was infinite, right? The ROI was infinite. But now the question is was it worth it for you to only get 6,000 and now the investor got the biggest chunk of that particular deal? Are you okay with that? Now, if you are okay with that and you're just saying that I'm going for the experience, now the question would be that if something does go wrong on the next deal, right, would you still have enough money to actually give back to that particular investor? If not, then we need to actually be looking at something different. Now, what I like about how we actually think about other people's money is that if I'm going to be going into a deal and I'm going to be asking for other people's money, I'm asking it from a sense of I want to build a relationship with that person rather than saying that this deal is reliant on the next person. Now, if your business model is reliant on the next person, then you don't have a business model. You're basically going to be asking for other people's money. But now, if you are saying that I'm going to be collecting other people's money, however, if they don't actually give me that money, I'm still able to continue with this deal. No? What's your take?
No, man, I think we became too technical. I do not want to lose people a lot. So, guys, if you want to know more about what we're speaking about, we did mention that on the 1st of October, we're having a property workshop in Midrand talking about property investing as a business. So we will be breaking down everything that we spoke about today. The last topic that I want us to cover on is ownership, because you did mention ownership, right? This is something that, especially as property investors, we do not take to heart until we find ourselves in trouble when it comes to ownership. So when I'm saying ownership, I'm either talking about the 2 Ds, death or divorce. That comes ownership. So we're talking about death or divorce. So now the problem is that most of the time when you go into property investing or any business venture, I'm already thinking about financial freedom. I'm already thinking about money. I want to be rich. I'm not thinking about what can go wrong or how do I protect the assets. Because you see this with a lot of investors. You find out that they come together. For instance, it's myself and Lebo. We came together and then we're investing in this property only to find out that I'm married in community of property, or I didn't even have a contract in place that said that I'm married in community of property. So now how does that affect our business? Lebo, what is your take when it comes to ownership?
Now, with ownership, man, it becomes a bit difficult, right? That are you able to put yourself out of the situation and not be thinking about how you were actually programmed, right? But what I was saying, right, is that if you're in a situation whereby at home Thank you. So now if you're in a situation whereby at home they've been telling you that, guys, you need to get married in community of property or something, right? We need to really understand that where is that actually coming from, right? Now, back in the day, it was actually good for someone to get married in community of property. However, now the problem becomes that with regards to the world being an open market, whereby now we can actually do business overseas, right? Now we can actually do business, say for instance, in Cape Town or in Durban or in Johannesburg. Now the question it would be that if you were to actually travel all of these places, would your spouse be able to actually travel with you? Now, if they won't be able to travel with you, that means that you can't do any deal unless your spouse is there. Now, that's the first thing to actually consider, especially for someone that is actually doing business. The second thing to consider is that if your spouse is going to actually be taking credit and now they get blacklisted, automatically that means that you also need to get blacklisted. You need to also carry their weight. So now in that way, at least if you are not actually in community of property, doesn't necessarily mean that you love the person any less. It just means that you are actually going to be pushing to a point whereby if anything does actually happen to the assets or to yourself, you know that everything is still covered according to what you had actually wanted.
Yeah. And again, when it comes to ownership, from my point of view, is that I want to touch on a sensitive topic, right? Especially when it comes to ownership. So sometimes you find out that when it comes to property investing, I do not want to talk about a will because a will is boring. I'll see it there at the end, how will it benefit me or not. Only to find out that if I pass away and I had 30 properties, now there was no will in place, there was no trust in place. Now all of these assets or liabilities, however you want to term them, they have to be transferred from myself to my next of kin. You only to find out that now he has to pay transfer on all of them. So if he's paying transfer costs on all of them, like on average, let's say that I owned about 30, Let's just say that we own 30 properties, right? And then something happened to me. So now they all have to be transferred to my next of kin. So that means he needs to pay transfer costs on each and every one of them. So let's just say on average, if one was 45,000 transfer cost. So what you're going to do is that you're going to say 45,000 times 30. And then you'll understand how much he would then need to pay in order for all of these assets to be transferred to him. So ultimately what we're saying is that we really need to look at the fundamentals of property investing before we even go into property investing. We really need to understand, I like saying that, I'm going to repeat it, the exit strategy, because most of the time we only think about how do I go in. I'm not thinking about how do I exit from this.